What you're about to see may change the way you think about war. Classified footage, unexpected maneuvers, and the truth hidden behind official reports. In the dark heart of the Ukrainian steppe, where every road is a potential trap and every bush hides fire, two American M1A2 Abrams tanks found themselves face to face with a Russian brigade that held numerical and technical superiority. This is not a Hollywood blockbuster script, this is a real episode from the modern war. The story we tell today is about iron, courage, and lightning-fast tactics that defy the laws of probability. Calm before the storm. It happened during one of the tensest stages of the Russo-Ukrainian War. The Russian 35th Motor Rifle Brigade was advancing through the Kharkiv direction with the intent to break through the defensive line and cut off Ukrainian forces in the rear. Everything was going according to plan until they appeared. Two Abrams armored giants sent to support Ukrainian forces rolled out to meet the metal hurricane. Who are the Abrams? But first, let us understand what Abrams is. It is not just a tank. It is a combat monster born in the USA during the Cold War wave. 62 tons of armor, a 120mm cannon, thermal targeting, an active protection system that destroys incoming missiles. The M1A2 Abrams is a blazing fist of NATO's armored doctrine, designed to destroy targets before they even notice it. These two machines were deployed not for attack, but to defend a strategic node in eastern Kharkiv region. They were to hold the position until the arrival of main forces. But in reality, it turned out differently. Instead of passive defense, they had to face a full Russian armored group head-on. The unfolding events. Recon reported a column of over 40 units of equipment approaching T-70 to B-3 tanks, BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicles, Ural trucks carrying troops. The Abrams were already in position. They had no option to retreat. Ukrainian infantry was behind them. They had 38 shells and only a few minutes to decide the battle's outcome. First shot fired. At 4:42 a.m. The first Abrams opened fire. The hit was precise. One of the T-72s exploded, and the blast wave destroyed a BMP nearby. But this only enraged the enemy. The Russians responded with fire from 30mm cannons, anti-tank guided missiles, and mortars. Both tanks kept moving constantly, never standing still, dodging fire. One suffered several hits on its track, but remained operational. Abrams combat tactics. The secret of the Abrams survival lay in coordination. Both crews acted as one distracted fire. The other destroyed targets. They were covered by smoke screens, and thermal imagers let them see through dust and fog. After 25 minutes of battle, the Russian column lost more than 17 pieces of equipment. The attack was stopped. The remnants began retreating, and all this thanks to only 2 tanks. The fight lasted over 40 minutes. Usually, tank duels are decided in minutes, but here it was different. The Abrams moved with agility that surprised even Ukrainian infantry observing from the flanks. Every shot was accurate, every move honed to automatism. The American crews knew their main enemy was not only Russian tanks, but also time. Ammunition was running low. Less than 10 shells remained at that point. Radio was silent, communication lost due to electronic warfare jamming. They were alone, one-on-one with a whole brigade. The Russian response: encircle and destroy. The Russian command understood. The column was stuck. They decided to send a strike group. 3 T-80 tanks, a battery of Kornet anti-tank missiles, and Lancet kamikaze drones. They were to hit simultaneously from 3 directions. This was supposed to be the fatal blow, complete destruction of the Abrams. But the crews had seen this before. Sergeant Jackson, an Iraq veteran, raised a smoke screen and signaled the other tank to shift 300 meters flank. They split, feigned retreat, then struck back, knocking out 1 T-80 before it could aim. Drones above. Strike from the sky. Then came a new trial: kamikaze drones. 2 Lancets whistled through the air. The Abrams activated the Trophy Active Protection System. The first drone was AUT-LL guns full tempo. Fight to the last. They charged. 2 tanks against dozens. Straight through burning battlefield remnants. It was suicide or a brilliant maneuver. They broke the enemy's front line, firing as enemy COULD&T even turned turrets. One Abrams spun almost in place, using terrain to shield its vulnerable rear. The other used wreckage for cover, continuing to shoot at infantry trying to exit BMPs. Meanwhile, Ukrainian infantry counterattacked. Under tank cover, they took flanking positions. Some Russian crews abandoned vehicles, unable to withstand fire. The rest retreated. After hours, the field was shrouded in smoke, like a scene from an apocalypse movie. Only 2 tanks remained operational, both Abrams. Their armor was torn by debris, but they survived. They won. Journalists arriving next day filmed with drones the terrifying scene. Dozens of destroyed BMPs, T-90s, burnt Ural trucks. At the center, 2 machines that started the legend. This was not just machine victory. This was people's victory, those inside. Risking. Deciding. Tanks gave strength. People gave heart. But this wasn't just a show of American engineering against Russian numbers. This was about coordination, nerves of steel, and battlefield communication under the most intense pressure. The Abrams crews had only seconds to assess threats, maneuver, and fire. Drones hovered above, providing real-time intel. But signal interference made footage unreliable. It was up to the tank commanders, their gut instinct, and their training to survive. As the first wave of Russian IFVs approached, the lead Abrams fired its 120mm smoothbore cannon. The tungsten armor-piercing round tore through the lead vehicle, erupting it in flames. The Russian convoy halted, momentarily stunned. But then, as if fueled by anger, the remaining vehicles spread out, flanking from both sides. The Abrams tanks repositioned, using debris and elevation for cover. Their machine guns roared, shredding infantry units advancing behind the armor. Every minute felt like an eternity. Over radio comms, distorted by signal jamming, the tank commanders could barely coordinate. They relied on visual signals, turret nods, engine revs, track movement, like steel beasts communicating in a language only they understood. From the nearby Trey line, a Kornet ATGM team launched a missile, a glowing streak across the dusk-lit sky. It was heading straight for Abrams 1. The crew had less than 3 seconds. With a jolt, the driver maneuvered behind a concrete barrier just as the missile impacted, sending smoke and dirt high into the air. The tank rocked, but remained functional. Its reactive armor had absorbed the brunt of the impact. But the fight was far from over. Russian reinforcements arrived. As dusk turned to night, headlights appeared on the eastern horizon. Russian reinforcements, at least 2 additional mechanized companies and 1 heavy artillery battery, were joining the battle. This would now be a full-on siege. Abrams 2, slightly elevated on a ridge, acted as the spotter and sniper. Its gunner, call sign Bishop, had a reputation, a former tank competition winner, known for his ability to land a round on a moving target from over 3 kilometers away. And tonight, he would prove that title. He identified a T-90 main battle tank approaching from the left flank, using thermal imaging through the gunner's sight. Bishop tracked the tank's movement. The Russian tank fired first. Its shell landed 20 meters short. Bishop fired back. The round struck just below the turret ring. The T-90 was immobilized, smoking. At this point, the battlefield looked like something from a post-apocalyptic movie. Flames flickered from destroyed vehicles. Drones buzzed overhead, and the thunder of tank cannons echoed through the valley. Then, from above, a surprise. An American MQ-9 Reaper drone entered the airspace, undetected until it was already releasing payloads. With precise Hellfire strikes, It destroyed the remaining anti-tank squads hidden among the Trey line and decimated a Teda, Russian ammo truck that exploded with a force strong enough to knock over nearby soldiers. The Abrams crews, finally able to coordinate using encrypted frequencies routed through the drone, began a slow push forward, street by street. They cleared the village that had become a frontline buffer zone. Russian morale wavered. Their own drones had been jammed. Command posts received delayed intel. And worst of all, they underestimated what the well-trained Abrams crews could do. But it wasn't over. The final push. Hours into the engagement, the two tanks had already fired dozens of rounds, destroyed 9 armored vehicles, 3 tanks, and countless support assets. But fuel was running low. Ammunition was dangerously close to zero, and night vision systems were beginning to glitch due to electronic warfare pulses from Russian units nearby. Still, retreat wasn't an option. The Abrams crews knew they had to hold the line until the 3rd Mechanized Infantry Battalion arrived. From the west, estimated arrival, 35 minutes. They had to survive just that much longer, using smokescreen S and/or illuminator S. The two tanks maneuvered into what looked like a suicide position right in the middle of a destroyed boulevard, with minimal cover. But this was tactical. It was bait. Russian forces surged forward, believing the tanks exposed and weakened. And that's when the trap was sprung. Allied forces enter the battle. Out of nowhere, Javelin teams hidden in adjacent buildings launched coordinated attacks. Ukrainian infantry squads, part of a special joint task force, had infiltrated hours earlier. What followed was a lethal crossfire that decimated the advancing Russian column. In just under 15 minutes, what was meant to be a Russian push became a retreat. The Abrams tanks, now silent, smoked and battered, remained upright, their crews exhausted but alive. And the battlefield, littered with the remains of one of Russia's most aggressive mechanized assaults in recent memory. This wasn't just a win on a map. This was a strategic statement that in the right hands, even the tanks could hold a brigade. That advanced tech, combined with battlefield instinct and raw courage, could tip the scale in even the most lopsided of odds. The footage captured from this encounter would go on to become classified training material for NATO tank crews. Analysts would spend months reviewing every movement, every decision, and military historians would cite this battle as a defining moment in modern mechanized warfare. Because sometimes, war isn't about the numbers. It's about the will to fight and the armor to survive. As the sun finally rose above the horizon, it illuminated a scene of devastation. Smoke drifted like low clouds over shattered buildings and scorched earth. The silence was heavy, the kind that follows only after a storm of steel and fire. The two Abrams, scarred and blackened, were still there. One with a blown-off side skirt, the other with half its sensors melted from a near hit. But both had survived. Crews emerged, limping, bloodied, hugging each other in the open. Drones scanned the battlefield, confirming over 40 destroyed Russian vehicles, 3 tanks, 2 artillery platforms, and more than 100 enemy personnel neutralized. A handful of Ukrainian infantry regrouped beside the Abrams, many with just a few magazines left, yet alive because those 2 tanks had held the line. A Russian brigade had just been stopped cold by 2 tanks alone. Strategic impact. A battle that shook doctrine. What happened that day didn't just shift the line on a map, it shattered assumptions. Military analysts across the world took notice. War colleges began rewriting parts of their doctrine. One instructor in Fort Benning, Georgia, reportedly said, "We are teaching this battle for the next 20 years. That's not hyperbole, that's necessity." Why? Because this engagement proved that even in a world of drones, satellites, and cyber warfare, armored courage on the ground still decides wars. It also raised urgent questions in Moscow. Why did an entire mechanized brigade fail to overrun tanks? How did NATO drone coordination slip past Russian U systems? Why didn't the combined arms tactic work? And perhaps most painfully, what if there had been 5 Abrams instead of 2? Their names weren't shared in the press, for security reasons. NATO kept their identities classified. But to the locals in that region of Ukraine, they were called something else entirely. The Ghosts of Steel. They became legend in the area. Children painted tanks on walls. Farmers left flowers by the last known resting site of a destroyed BMP, a kind of battlefield shrine to the impossible stand they witnessed. Their actions echoed far beyond that village. They reignited confidence in NATO's forward deployment strategy. They inspired new calls for Abrams deliveries to partner nations. And most of all, they reminded the world that technology means nothing without bravery behind the trigger. What we witnessed wasn't just a display of firepower. It was a clash of philosophies: brute mass versus agile precision, the old versus the evolving. And at the center, 2 machines made of steel, powered not just by fuel, but by the sheer will of their crews. In the history of warfare, some battles are forgotten within days. This one will be remembered for decades. Because to Abrams didn't just survive. They changed the battlefield. Thank you for watching.